Thanks for joining us. And today we're going to talk about Kriya Yoga and mastering meditation. So Kriya Yoga is a very effective method for getting into deep meditation. And those of you who are Kriya bands who have a Kriya Yoga practice undoubtedly know this. And the reason why Kriya Yoga is so effective is because it works on the body's central nervous system. In particular, the parasympathetic nervous system. So the body's central nervous system has two aspects to it. One is the parasympathetic nervous system, which is like the brake of the nervous system, and the sympathetic nervous system is like the gas pedal of the nervous system. And so these work in tandem to bring you into an appropriate state for whatever you're using it for. If it's trying to rest, if it's trying to be active in the world, and so on. The parasympathetic nervous system is the one that Kriya Yoga works on. And it does this through a form of intentional breathing that we call Kriya Pranayama in Kriya Yoga. Has an effect on the dorsal vagal complex, which is a nerve from the parasympathetic nervous system that runs along the anterior part of the spine. And the slow, long breath helps to activate that nerve, which consequently affects the medulla oblongata in the brainstem, which is responsible for autonomic functions like heartbeat. And it actually slows down the heart. So you slow down the breath, you slow down the heart, and you start to be drawn into a low idle state. This low idle state in yoga is called pratyahara, sense withdrawal, or an internalization. And so you slow down your heart rate, you slow down your breath rate, and you start to recede inwards. And consequently, you start to go into a low idle state, which is conducive to meditation. So Kriya Yoga is very effective for inducing this very quickly. And it is said by Lahiri Baba, who was the originator of Kriya Yoga, that 12 Kriyas, these 12 repetitions of this intentional breathing of Kriya Pranayama, equals internalization pratyahara, meaning that within about 5 minutes or less, you can start to get signs of the galvanic skin response, the freeze response, which is the same as pratyahara, where you start to get an internalization of the senses. You start to be drawn within. You start to feel tingling throughout your body. It's a sign your parasympathetic nervous system is becoming predominant and you are being drawn within. So Kriya Yoga is very effective for this. It brings you into a meditative state very quickly, and it's so much faster than anything that I know of in other meditation techniques where they're using some kind of either following the breath or some kind of intentional breathing. Kriya Yoga is ingenious in its expeditious effect on the body's central nervous system to get you into a meditative state, right? So it brings on these states of awareness, these altered states of consciousness. So as you start to be drawn into the low idle state, the mind gets very still and clear, right? So if you know anything about meditation, you may have heard the analogy about a body of water, that if you're looking at say a pond, right, that if there are ripples on the surface of the water, you cannot see clearly to the bottom. But when the ripples and the wind ceases and the surface of the pond becomes very clear, you can see to the bottom. And meditation is kind of like that. That analogy is used to sort of say, okay, you've got a clarity of perception of what's actually happening inside at that time. And so meditation is seen as a way to, wow, get some clear insight into, the nature of phenomenon or the nature of the self. So when you're doing Kriya Yoga, what you initially start to feel is that signs of the freeze response. Pratyahara is coming on. You start to get into a low idle state. Things start to get clear and calm inside. Your mind is not wandering around and, being distracted by all these things, because your parasympathetic nervous system is bringing you into a low idle state. So your mind calms down too, right? So one of the things that in Kriya Yoga and many types of yogic practices that use a more concentration-focused meditation is that it's really about bringing up states of consciousness, right? So in Kriya Yoga, you're progressing through pratyahara, right, which is this sense withdrawal. And so you start to get calm, and what may happen then is that you start to approach the tranquil breath, right? So the tranquil breath is when your breath starts to shallow out and then disappears from your awareness. You're still breathing, but it's so slight that basically you're not even aware that you're breathing. And what happens from then, this is when your parasympathetic nervous system sort of kicks into high gear or into low gear, depending on how you look at it. And you get this incredible sense withdrawal where your body basically disappears. So your breath has disappeared, your body's disappeared, and you're drawn into something called dharana in yoga, which means this sort of concentration on an internalized void. So the body just basically disappears, and you're in, most people who experience that are like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm in the cave of meditation, if you will. And so this is revolutionary to a lot of people. So in Kriya Yoga, often the trajectory is to try to achieve these states of consciousness, to solidify and to stabilize them. So you're looking to initially stabilize pratyahara, so you're getting that sense withdrawal, that initial tingling throughout the body, which signals that you're shifting into a low idle state. The parasympathetic is becoming predominant, that you're going into internalization. And then the breath starts to disappear. You're in the tranquil breath, right? And trying to maintain those as stable states and progress deeper into meditation, into dharana, right? You're that internalized void where the body has completely disappeared, the breath has disappeared, and you're basically in this blackness within, right? And then as things start to shift and your vantage point kind of changes, and you might get this boundless expansion. So you start to feel this great spaciousness within you, and then so on and so on. And so the idea in Kriya Yoga and most yogic paths is that you're trying to solidify or stabilize those states of consciousness, with the idea being that you can reach an ultimate state of consciousness and stabilize that as an entity that is perpetual. Now, I've talked about this in other videos. And certainly those of you who have seen that video, basically Kriya Yoga and the Search for Truth, may remember me saying that basically truth is not about a perpetual state of bliss. But in this video, I would really like to point to the fact that when you are getting into states of meditation, into these deeper states, and you're trying to stabilize them because you're wanting to experience them for at least a period of time, right? They are temporary states of awareness. And we tend to think, when we haven't had the experience necessarily, or really noticed what's happening within those experiences, that really they're stable states, and they're not stable states. What you will realize is that things are constantly changing within them, just like in our daily activity. And what we tend to do when we get into meditation is we tend to become identified with certain states of consciousness. So people who may achieve dharana, right, this internalized void, really identify that as being a very calm, still place. You know, the breath has disappeared. It's amazing. It's so peaceful in there. So they may identify with that state as if it's a lasting and perpetual, permanent thing that they can access. But the reality is that state appears and it also disappears. So while concentration on these states can be important to start to develop the skills to transition into deeper states of awareness, they're not intrinsically valuable in themselves. They don't bring lasting satisfaction. Right. And as well, the states are not really stable, that they are constantly arising and disappearing. So if you actually really pay attention to whatever meditative state that you're getting into, even if it's just the feelings of paravasta. In Kriya Yoga, we talk about paravasta as the after effect poise state of Kriya, meaning what you will feel, usually the one that you feel is in your body first, a sort of a bodily bliss or bodily glee that happens as a result of doing Kriya Yoga practices. And people will say, oh wow, I feel bliss, this is amazing, right? As if it's some lasting thing, as if it has only one particular texture or one particular tone. But it is extremely variable, that every single sensation that arises within your feeling of paravasta is variable, new, and emerging and disappearing, right? And that is one thing among Kriya yogis that they tend to take for granted, that they don't really realize the intrinsic fluid nature of that experience as it arises and disappears. And so those transitions, being aware of what is actually happening in the current instant in your meditation, how all the sensations make up your perception of that state. That is an area that in Kriya Yoga, most people don't even talk about at all, but it's an essential area to investigate in your meditation. And it's so essential because what it does is start to bring clarity about what these states are. People are often using Kriya Yoga as a means to achieve this sort of state of ultimate salvation or ultimate realization, as if something like that existed and it's static and you could take refuge in it and be there forevermore. But instead of chasing after rainbows of a final state of realization, it is much better to explore what you are actually experiencing in the present moment in your meditation. And by doing that, you will realize something that you hadn't realized before. And if you do this, you can actually perceive what is happening in your meditation. Rather than projecting an idealized version of what you think meditation should be and trying to make that happen, you actually perceive what is happening there. Now, this is very transformative because it starts to sharpen your awareness for being able to clearly perceive what you experience in your meditation. And this can have a profound effect for your sadhana, for your spiritual path, for your spiritual development. For one thing, it will make you more aware of the particular sensations that arise when you transition into deeper and deeper meditative states, and for you to be able to develop some skills so that you're able to transition into deeper meditative states. The other thing that it can do is to provide some insight into the arising and passing away of sensations, which allows you to have a clarity of perception on what is actually happening. So the next time you're practicing your Kriya Yoga, instead of just going through the motions of the routine as you know it, pay attention to the sensations that arise as a result of your practice. And you will be amazed by the wealth of sensations that arise in your meditation, how this takes you into deeper states, and how this helps to improve your clarity and awareness. So if you have any questions about this video, feel free to send me an email at info@modernkriya.com. Also check our website at modernkriya.com and our YouTube channel. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.